Welcome to Money Matters TV. My name is Paul Michell. I'm a commercial banker, and I'm your co-host for this show. Joining me is my co-host, Jim Lorenzo of Jim Lorenzo Public Relations.
Good to see you again.
Jim, welcome back to the show.
Nice to be here.
So, public relations.
Yes, sir.
Boy, it sounds like a pretty busy industry these days.
It is.
A lot of stuff going on.
It really is. There's a lot of different new techniques that are coming in to play. The rise of social media, such as Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat. That has had a big impact on the discipline of public relations and trying to tell a story in what used to be 140 characters now is at 280 characters on Twitter. Wow. You have to really come up with some concise message points and some compelling story ideas to get that message across in a short burst of tweets.
You know, it's interesting. We had a guest on another show recently, and he has no presence at all in social media, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or anything.
That is interesting.
Both personally and with his business. And he seemed like a pretty regular guy, too.
Right. Well, I think you can still get away with that in certain businesses and certain fields. But I think, in my case, I work with a lot of charity and nonprofit organizations, also work with some sports and entertainment properties and some personalities. So you really need, in that instance, you really need to have a social media presence in order to keep your brand alive.
Well, mention a charity. You don't have to mention the name if you don't want, but just the kind of charity it is and how the social media is used for that.
Right now I'm working with the Andy Talley Bone Marrow Foundation, which is a charitable organization set up by the former head coach of Villanova University's football team, Andy Talley. And he had heard about the need for bone marrow donors and potential donors 20 years ago by listening to a local radio station, and he said they had in the radio report he had heard that the ideal demographic for bone marrow donors is the 18 to 25-year-old segment of the population. And he felt that, okay, I've got 90 football players who are at the peak of their physical condition, why don't I get them involved somehow? And he's, over the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years, he's grown that into a national program where they have over 100 college football programs across the country, raising the number of potential donors across the country for bone marrow transplants.
So how does social media used by that?
They use social media to spread the word about the donor registration drives, for fundraising activities, also for the good stories about the people who donated their bone marrow and how they've helped save somebody's life. They've had over 400 donors who've participated, who have donated their bone marrow to 400 individuals that they've saved those 400 people's lives. So what they use social media for is to drive awareness of their campaign, to get more donors involved, to get more people signed up to potentially donate their bone marrow, but also to raise funds. So they use Twitter, they use Facebook. They're having an event in March where they're selling tickets through their Facebook page. So they do a lot of their activity on social media to keep their community engaged.
Well, I've never seen information about them. Why would that be?
Well, to my defense, I just started working with them. But we're working on solving that problem. One of the things I would like to do...
Not that I want to be inundated with the social media, but...
They've been very successful in the Philadelphia market, getting the awareness out because of their affiliation with Villanova University. What I'm hoping to do with them and what I'm working to do with them is raise their national profile so that you see more of them in the news on a national level. But at the same time with social media, again, this is an outgrowth of the college campus environment where they started. So your college audience is very active in social media.
I'm not going to say I'm a little bit beyond
You may not be the
age.
target demographic right now. That's what I'll just say.
But the target I am for is giving platelets.
Right.
I mean, you give blood, but platelets are another form. They just take the platelets out of your blood. You hook up the machine, and they go.
And the other thing,
it's a bigger deal. It takes 3 hours.
And the other aspect of it too is fundraising. Whether they have sponsorships, whether they have individual cash donors, or financial support.
What I like about some of the stuff the Red Cross has been doing with this platelet situation is they're actually telling me now where my platelets were used.
Yes.
They'll even tell a little story about it.
That's a wonderful thing, and that's one of the initiatives I'll be working on with the Andy Talley Bone Marrow Foundation, is spreading the word about, okay, so-and-so donated their bone marrow, and it usually takes a year for them to know. They don't tell the identity of the person who received the donation until a year after the transplant. And then what we're organizing is match meetings where we bring the donor and the recipient together for the first time.
Wow, yeah.
So they get to see how their donation made this impact on somebody's life. So we're starting to do that more and more.
That's good stuff. PR also has a lot of not such good stuff.
I try to tend
in
to
the
take
news, PR,
to
the
stay away from that.
twisting things, or the truth, or
Yes.
what kind of truth it is, and
The fake news, fake
Could be,
news
yeah.
or whatever we want to call it these days. And what I've always believed and what I continue to preach to my clients, whether they be business properties or they be individuals, is that we all have very good stories to tell. Sometimes we don't know what those good stories are. So if we can keep telling our good stories and using public relations tools to tell those good stories and get that out there, we can kind of counterattack the negative stories that are out there. One of the things I'm working with Coach Talley and his foundation on right now is there are many negative stories about college football, whether it be money scandals, whether it be social scandals. But here's a really positive story about how we're saving lives through college football. And that's something that I want to counter the negative with the positive.
right.
So I work very hard to make sure that the positive stories are told, and I tend to stay away from crisis management or negative campaigns, because
Right.
there are enough people that can do that and are specialized in that.
Yeah.
I'd rather concentrate on the positive.
I mean, one of the difficulties is if it's on the internet, does that mean it's true? If it's on Twitter, social media, is it true? I mean, I look occasionally at some of these things and I spend maybe 5 minutes. I go, wow, really?
Well, it's an interesting aspect of social media and the internet. I mean, I started working with the internet in '95, and I started working with an internet company in early '97, and a lot of people weren't unsure of what the internet could do or why it would be helpful for business, and now we can't imagine doing business without it. But one of the things I've thought about for years, when we were growing up, when we went to school, we were told that if we did something bad, it would be on our permanent record. And we didn't believe that then, because we might have believed it at the time, especially when we were younger, that, oh, this is going to be on your permanent record. And oh my God, this is going to follow me for the rest of my life. Now there is a permanent record.
Yeah.
It's called the internet.
Oof.
So
Of everything.
there was an incident this past weekend when, don't want to put a timestamp on this, but when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, there were some incidents in the city of Philadelphia, and there were some public displays of vandalism and other things. And I'm sitting there watching this with my wife the other night, and I said to my wife, we're on camera everywhere we go.
Yeah.
There is a permanent record. And I think people have begun to forget that there's a camera in the elevator, there's a camera in the convenience store, there's a camera at the street corner, there's a camera in the ATM. So if you're going to do something bad, know that they will find you somehow.
I have a neighbor, not a immediate neighbor, but about 2 blocks away, that apparently videotaped a minor, small level crime going on in his neighborhood. He has 6 cameras on his house.
Oh my gosh.
And this was high quality. I saw it on his phone.
Right.
I mean, he bought the cameras, but other than that, he doesn't spend a lot of money on it. And it just, he just keeps them going, and if he wants to look up something, he'll look up something.
Right.
It's amazing.
So there's video out there, and so when we're out in the community, when we're out in public, we're on camera right now, we're being recorded, but we're also being recorded when we're walking down the street, or we're being recorded when we're walking into a store. So you have to be cognizant of that, and you have to be aware that, okay, how do I want people to look at me? outside of my house?
Yep.
How do I want people to look at me outside of my office? And I preach to my clients and my friends to be aware of that, be cognizant of that. Don't be afraid of it, but at the same time, don't neglect it and don't overlook it.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I should carry around more often my underdog mask.
Yeah, some kind of mask, or maybe a makeup kit, or I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Always make sure your hair is in place. And,
I try, but it gets more challenging as,
Yes,
as,
same
as
here.
we go.
Yes.
As we go. Well, what kind of businesses besides charities and that type of thing do you work
Well,
with?
I'm working with some technology firms. I'm working with some business-to-business companies
Okay.
that provide services. And I also work with some sports and entertainment properties, whether they have a special event or... So for the last few years, I've worked with Penn Mutual Collegiate Rugby Championship, which is held every year in June, the first weekend in June, down at the Talon Energy Stadium in Chester.
Okay.
So I've worked with them for the last 5 years.
Is this a soccer stadium?
Yes.
Okay. And they have different sponsors, different names, so
Right.
it's hard to keep track of at times.
So I see a lot of things that I try to do in the lead up to that event so that we can help sell tickets and make sure people are aware that the event is coming to town.
Sure.
And I just started working with the Philadelphia Freedoms of World Team Tennis. They're having their 2018 season is at St. Joseph's University's
Okay.
Hagen Arena this year. So right now I'm working on the rollout of their season ticket campaign and making sure people are aware to buy the tickets and where they can go to see the matches in July, and who's going to be on the team. That will be decided when they have their World Team Tennis draft coming up in the middle of March.
We have a question from one of our viewers.
Yes.
That thing's right up your alley.
I hope so.
Woods of Philadelphia asks, what is the difference between branding, marketing, and public relations?
That's an interesting question, Barbara, and I get that a lot. And the way I look at it is there are three legs of the stool. There are three disciplines in and of themselves. I work primarily in public relations. I've been in public relations all my life since I was about 18 years old. So I look at public relations as a tool that people use in marketing a company or a brand. Branding, the first part of your question, branding is the establishment of a brand name, a logo, an identity, and that can be done through creation of a logo, an image,
A name?
a name. You know, think of all the different names. Like Google changed their corporate name to Alphabet several years ago, but people still think of Google as Google. They don't
Right.
think of Alphabet.
Sure.
So they have the challenge of, do they want to be known as Alphabet? Do they want to be known as Google? Which is a good problem for them to have because Google is so well known. But think of other companies that have changed their name or changed their logo and how they go about it. The branding process is such that they went to their audience, they went to their buyers, they went to their consumers and said, what do you think of this name? What do you think of this name? What do you think of this logo? What do you think of this image?
And you better not have that name mean something else in another language.
Exactly.
That's unsavory.
That has happened too. So you have to be very careful what you do, and the branding is one component of marketing. Marketing is kind of the umbrella that we all reside under. Branding, public relations, marketing, advertising. On the marketing side, like I said, I look at that as the umbrella that we all live under. But marketing can be many things. It can be developing an advertising strategy. It can be developing the branding strategy, developing the public relations strategy.
Kind of getting the message out, so to
Right.
speak. And a lot of people confuse sales and marketing.
Right.
But marketing is getting the message out, and sales is using that message to
Build sales.
make a transaction.
Right. And the marketing can also cover things as mundane as packaging. What does the package look like that you buy your product in? Is there a package? What does it say on the package? So there are a lot of different aspects under that as well. On the public relations side, I look at public relations as public relations. I'm out there meeting people. I'm out there relating to people. You need to have a message where I want to be in touch with my community. I want to be in touch with my consumers, my audience, the people I want to buy my product, or people who want to influence the sales of your product or your service. So I work with my clients to build their level of trust with the community that they serve. So whether it be the Andy Talley Bone Marrow Foundation, or whether it be the Philadelphia Freedoms, or whether it be the Penn Mutual Collegiate Rugby Championship, or even Wizard World Comic Con. I work with their brands to make sure that their stories get told. And I try to find as many good stories to tell and help people feel a relationship to that company. You want to work on that feeling.
Sure.
You don't
The emotion, right?
Right. You want to work on the emotion, not the thinking part. You want to work on the heart part.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I'm glad you were here, Jim, because that question was right up your alley. You're a pro at this stuff.
I hope I was helpful.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome, Paul.
There's another way that our viewers can send in questions, and here's how to do it. And watch this.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
And now it is time to introduce our featured guest for this show. Our featured guest is Virginia Hinrichs McMichael, Esquire, of the Appellate Law Group, LLC. Virginia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here today.
So you sound like a very specialized type of attorney.
Well, I am. Appellate Law Group is an appellate boutique, and we represent clients, individuals, and corporations in the state and federal courts in Pennsylvania, principally. And whereas many lawyers are specialized by a type of law, tax law, estate law, litigation, we're actually more narrow than that in that we handle litigation, trials, but at the appellate stage of the litigation.
So appellate, is that like appeal?
It is indeed.
Okay.
So and they're in both the federal and state systems. There are a couple of different levels of appeal. So try the case and it gets appealed in Pennsylvania to either the Superior Court or the Commonwealth Court, and then you can appeal or seek an appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Similarly, in the federal system, you go from the district court to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, and then possibly to the United States Supreme Court. And so we just handle it at those later stages. I see us as the lawyers of last resort in some instances, because people call me when things didn't go their way at trial, or sometimes they won below and they just want to keep that decision.
Now, why did you start your firm?
Well, I started my firm. I was a partner for most of my career with a firm in Philadelphia, Dilworth Paxson, and I practiced commercial litigation and also did appellate work. And I really gravitated to the appellate practice because I was an English major in college. I love to read and I love to write, but I wasn't good at creative writing. I wasn't going to write the world's greatest novel. I'm not Herman Melville or something like that. But I really liked that, and found that I was taking on more and more appeals for many of my fellow partners. And so I had the opportunity to work in lots of different substantive areas. So I would get something involving a tax issue or an estates issue or occasional personal injury case, partnership disputes, contract disputes. The biggest matter I was involved in, we represented the Republic of Uruguay. And it was an appeal from a $200 million arbitration judgment, and it was in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. So I'm not representing them now, but it was a great experience, involved all kinds of novel issues of international law, and I speak Spanish, so that made it a lot more fun as well.
What's an example of commercial litigation?
Commercial litigation would be a dispute over a contract.
Business to business type of thing?
Mostly business disputes. It could be a real estate dispute over a lease. I had one appeal that had to do with a lease at a shopping center and a non-compete provision in that lease that you can't also put a competing pharmacy in this shopping center, that kind of thing. Just all the wide variety of commercial disputes, an occasional securities law matter or tax matter. The thing that I liked about my practice is that it kept me on my toes, and still does, because every case is very different.
Oh, yeah.
And you learn a new substantive area of the law with each case, and there's overlap, obviously. In 30 years of practice, you see a lot of things over and over. But I enjoy really delving into a different fact situation, meeting different clients. It's just never boring. And I love writing the brief. I will focus in and work for 8 hours writing and analyzing and thinking about it when I'm walking the dog. And
Do you charge
it's
when
fun.
you're walking the dog?
No, I do not. They get the advantage of it's in my head.
Okay.
And sometimes you'll just get inspiration of a great opening line for a brief. I find lots of lawyers can write a brief and make the legal argument in a clear format, but it takes a certain amount of art to take a brief and take it to the next level where it's readable and enjoyable and easy to understand, and that's the piece of it that I really like, where you can throw in a metaphor or analogy or make something just more interesting to read. Superior Court, for example, has 8,000 appeals a year. And if you go into one of the judges' chambers, they'll show you a stack of briefs that's 2 feet high that they have to read in a few days.
How many
For the one,
So-
for the one case.
Well, they'll usually have 3 briefs per case plus a record that has to be reviewed. And so they're very busy people.
How many judges are there in Superior Court?
There are 20.
20. But all of them would read all the same stuff?
No, they break it down into panels of 3 judges. So if I'm handling an appeal, you put together the trial court record. It becomes a big bound volume of everything that's relevant in the trial court, and you write a brief, which, although they're called briefs, they tend to be 50-page documents. There's nothing brief about them. It's a total misnomer. And then that gets submitted to the court as the brief of the appellant, if you're representing the person who's taking the appeal. And then the other side files the brief of the appellee. And then you get an opportunity to write a reply brief, which is shorter and focuses in on the issues. And then in Pennsylvania, we have oral argument as well. And that's an opportunity to present your case verbally to the panel of judges. There are 3 judges sitting up there, and you have a limited amount of time. And you have to convince them that your side is right. It's challenging, but it's fun too. And the secret is to take, I hate to use military analogies, but in writing a brief or making an argument on appeal, you can't use the shotgun approach. Because if you raise 12 or 15 issues, there's sort of assumption that you don't have any good ones. and so I see it more as the sniper rifle approach, that you have to go through a whole lot of material and say, this is how we can get this case turned around, if you're the appellant. And you focus in with laser-like focus on that issue and come up with every possible way of convincing them. And I just won a case last week, in fact. And
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it
Winning week.
it's always great to win, and particularly when you're the appellant, because what most people don't realize is that most cases are affirmed. So when you're the appellate, you're saying the judge made a mistake below because, and it was an error of law, and therefore you need to reverse and remand. And I was successful in persuading them that the trial judge had made an error of law, and so it was a good day for my client. They were very happy.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is, and but it's fun and it's challenging, and when I was thinking about what I wanted to do for the latter part of my career, I took some time and I thought, what do I enjoy doing, and what do I do well, that I know I do well and other people know I do well.
Right.
And it kept coming back to appellate practice. And so there are not many appellate boutiques out there. I think I may be one of the few women-owned appellate boutiques in the country.
Wow.
Hopefully we'll be expanding beyond Philadelphia.
Do you have an association yet? They could use some PR.
Well, I was very interested in what you were saying about branding, because I went through a lot of that when I started my own firm, and I created a logo, and I came up with the name Appellate Law Group, in part because A makes it first on the list.
There you go. That's a big factor.
And I also thought in terms of search engine optimization that people are going to look for appellate lawyer, and my name may pop up sooner. And lots of attorneys use their own name. And I know a lot of people. I think I have pretty good name recognition, but I want to reach out to those people who don't know me yet. And having a name like that, which you can do in Pennsylvania, they allow fictitious names. Not every state does. Not every state's ethical rules allow you to have a name like that. But it's worked well.
And it advertises your specialty.
Right. I have been in a room of lawyers where we each go around and say, "What do you do?" And everybody says, "Well, I'm a labor lawyer. I do tax. I do estates work." And I say, my firm is Appellate Law Group, and I handle appeals, and it sticks in people's minds. They say, "Oh, the appellate lawyer," because it reinforces it. And there are a lot of lawyers out there. There are a lot of very good lawyers. And I think those of us who started our own firm need to find ways to differentiate what we do from what everybody else does. And that's what I did.
We're running out of time a little bit, but I just want to focus on one area that you mentioned we should probably touch upon. Is a lot of people are going to say, "Oh boy, appeals, that's going to be expensive." How does somebody deal with that?
Well, it is expensive, and people often don't realize that an appeal can cost as much as their trial did in some instances if it's a really complicated case. But as with anything, it's important to get the right fit, the right lawyer for the particular job. And I think lawyers have become more specialized over the years, and finding the right fit is good. And then there are also different kinds of fee arrangements. I mean, most lawyers bill by the hour, but you can do some types of matters are appropriate for a flat fee or a blended rate, whereas the different lawyers at a firm charge the same rate. So for one price, you get somebody with more experience and somebody with less. Contingent fees, even in appellate cases, occasionally there's a role for a partial contingent fee. So I think it's important for people to be careful in who they hire. I think sometimes people make the mistake of thinking they could do it themselves, and it's a lot more complicated than they realize. There are lots of things we can do ourselves. I mean, you can give yourself a haircut, but it's not as good as the one that you get at the barber shop.
So if our viewers wanted to contact you, they would just Google your name, or
you can. And I even have an 800 number.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. So
with the Appellate Law Group, I think that appears on the screen. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Terrific. Well, it sounds like an interesting field, and another female-owned industry. It sounds.
That's right.
Like.
Well,
very
there
good.
Lots and lots of women-owned firms coming around.
Thank you very much for coming in and educating us on the appeals process.
Well, it's been great. I really appreciate having a chance to talk with you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Our next guest will be Jerry Ellman, JD, of Ellman Technology Group, PC. So that is also another specialized professional field. So it'll be an interesting show at that time. So in conclusion, we'd just like to thank you for watching us and remind you that your money matters.